Great. You may need to press OK or something like that on your screens. Hi, everybody. My name is Godfrey Plata. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the Deputy Director at LA Forward Institute. We'll share a little bit more about who we are since we're hosting this Zoom, but we are joined by colleagues at a variety of different organizations. Ground Game LA and League of Women Voters have in particular taken interest and support in the conversation today. And you're also going to hear from colleagues at Catalyst California and Social Justice Learning Institute throughout today as well. You are in the right place if you're here for a honestly brief conversation just to start with around policing and LA City Charter. And we are here to set the stage for action. Our goal today is to be able to make sure that folks understand just how important and relevant it is to bring up police reform as part of the city's City Charter Commission processes. And we will give you immediate actions that you can take today, right now, to be able to support us to be able to make sure that this conversation takes place during this rare opportunity to evaluate the city charter. Because we're hosting this Zoom, I just want to make sure that folks know who LA Forward Institute is. We don't spend all day, every day talking about the charter. We focus on community building and ensuring that folks are able to tap into their local democracies. That means city level, county level. Today we're talking LA City in particular. At the end of the day, that community, when it brings up concerns that are meaningful to them, we support folks with civic education and leadership development to be able to activate in those local democracies. The work that you're seeing today is a result of lots of our community members and coalition partners asking questions not only about the city charter, but about police reform in general. And at LA Forward Institute, we have two different working groups, one on the City Charter Commission, but also on unarmed crisis response services as alternatives to policing. And it's both of those conversations that have come to sort of a collision here with this particular set of questions around why we haven't been able to agendize police reform as part of the city's charter commission conversation. Here's what we're doing today on the call. We're just going to do some laying of the groundwork just to make sure folks know about this thing called the City Charter Commission. You may be here because the words police reform caught your eye, but it has to do with the City Charter Commission, and that's maybe a little bit more of a wonkier term. So I just want to make sure that folks have some basic knowledge there. We'll also set the stage for why we're having this conversation and why we felt like a teach-in would be really helpful. We've got colleagues from Catalyst California and Social Justice Learning Institute who will be sharing some knowledge and data and information with us about why police reform is a relevant topic for the Charter Commission. And then we're going to jump into those action items. If at any point you've got questions for discussion after the presentation, toward the end, you see here we've got time for Q&A around 6:45. We've got a Q&A document at the ready. If you go to tinyurl.com/policereformqa, actually, if someone could put that in the chat box so folks can head there, that would be helpful. Or you can use this QR code that you see on the screen so you can capture questions there. And that way, when we get to Q&A, we don't have to scroll up through the chat box or anything. Everything will be on one page once we get there. So again, at any point, if you've got questions, feel free to go to tinyurl.com/policereformqa or head to that QR code right now. You'll see that in just a little bit again. So just a little bit, you're not going to read everything on this screen. We've done many teach-ins on city charter reform. Shout out to Tathir, who created the screen and supports our charter reform working group. At the end of the day, what you need to know is that as a city, Los Angeles has a version of a constitution that governs just the city level, and it's called the charter. So we have a mayor because the charter says so. We have city council members because the charter says so. Their relationship is because the charter says so. All of the rules of how we govern are in this thing called the city charter. And the last time we looked at it was 1999, and a lot of it was drafted 100 years ago in 1925. And so recently, because of a lot of the outcomes coming out of the leaked audio tapes a few years ago, the city has dedicated a lot of its resources toward making sure we're reevaluating aspects of the charter. It started with independent redistricting, which we voted into fruition this last November. But this commission is intended to be able to take a look at the entire charter and look at possible ballot initiatives that could be on voters' ballots as soon as November 2026. In order to get there, a commission that is happening right now needs to pass off recommendations to city council. City council will pick and choose amongst those recommendations or throw them out the window if they want and start anew and put things on the ballot. But basically, it has to pass through those three stages, commission, city council, to get on the ballot if we're trying to get things through. These types of recommendations and reforms through this commission level. You could always skip the commission altogether. You could just go straight to council. You could also collect lots of signatures and get something on the ballot as well. But there's just one way for voters to evolve what's on the city charter for Los Angeles. Here's how the commission works. There's supposed to be 13 people on it, but right now there's only 12. Longer story, but there's 12. And there's 4 committees that are evaluating lots of the different types of conversations and reforms that are in play. Some of us have been trying to track as many of these as possible. There could be more than 100 of these reforms that are in conversation. But you see the 4 committees here are in red, planning infrastructure, better government structure, and personnel and budget. And each of them have different assigned reforms on them. So you just see some sample reforms here. Today, we're going to talk about policing reforms that likely fall under personnel and budget. So we're going to focus in on that particular committee. And as we tell you to go into action, we're going to focus on the committee members on that committee in particular, even though the full commission of 12 or 13 people will have to actually vote things through the city council. So we're here to talk about LAPD and police reform. Why? Because the history of our city has pretty much not been able to escape questions around how we leverage police to enforce laws in our city. And even really relevantly, over the last 6 months or so, we know in particular as the federal administration has escalated attacks on our communities, that LAPD has played some sort of role in the story of how we've experienced these particular attacks. Some people ask, like, well, isn't the LAPD stuff like in other types of law and policy? Some of it, but it's actually in the charter. And to make sure that we know where it is in the charter, here it is. These are the different sections. You can take a picture, take a screenshot, whatever it is. We're not going to read through all the pages of the charter today, but know that it's in the charter, and that's all you need to know for today. And so we're trying to figure out today a way to compel the Charter Reform Commission to take a look at these parts of the charter, not to ignore it. We want to agendize conversations about these sections of the charter, not to ignore it. Cool? We've tried, so I just want to say that, like, we've tried getting conversations agendized. Back in August, I personally was at a city hall hearing where the conversation that the commissioners were having were around the different presentations and study sessions they were receiving about various topics. At one point, someone asked, well, what about topics we haven't heard from yet or presenters we haven't heard from? The chair, Raymond Meza, said, well, if, we haven't really rejected any groups for presentations. So I, as somebody in community and a leader at our organization interested in this, was like, cool, let me write an email to the staff asking them to agendize presentations. At the time, I was interested in climate justice and police reform because it was 2 things that our community members are asking about. I got this reply. This is literally a screenshot of the reply I got back, and notice underlined, it was like, we don't really have time for that, is what I got in terms of a reply. And this was literally 27 minutes later. So at least they're reading their email. That's good. We got the reply back, though, that we don't have time, but you can go to public comment if you want. And so we did. Our friends at Ground Game LA actually started getting Zooms together to write a letter and say, like, here are some possible areas for police reform you could consider. Then they sent this to all the commissioners and the staff, and now this is out there in terms of just public documentation about this. We actually did give public comment. This is a picture of me and Carolina from League of Women Voters actually giving public comment at Harbor College about the same very issue about agendizing police reform. I literally gave language for commissioners to make motions in order to agendize police reform, and we haven't gotten it agendized yet. Lots of people wrote written comment in addition to giving public comment. We even met with commissioners. We went to someone's backyard and invited the commissioners in charge of both the full commission and the committee. We even visited a council member's office who was really interested in police reform through the charter. We got lots of different pieces of interest from commissioners and council members. One council member even used it as part of her speech opening up a November charter meeting. We've mentioned it all of these different times, and yet nothing has been agendized yet. So today you're going to learn more about why we ought to agendize police reform, but at the end of all of this, or even now, we'd love for you to already take action. If you go to laforward.org/policing, we have a one-stop email where like literally you can go to this website, click on the link, and it'll send an email out to request agendizing police reform to some key members of the commission, the staff, the chairs, as well as the three people on the commission of or the committee of personnel and budgeting. We also encourage, of course, public comment. Not everyone can make it down there. They're supposed to have remote comment, but sometimes that's not possible. So go down there. That's probably the best way to make sure that you can get in front of our commissioners. These are the next 3 times that personnel and budget is meeting. In highlighted in yellow where it says TBD, we believe that if we push hard enough, we could get police reform agendized for one of these days, possibly. We don't know yet. It's not up on the website. We don't know. So that's what we're trying to do here today is to get them or to hold the commission accountable to actually doing this thing, which they've said they're interested in, but have not yet done so, and time is running out. The most important and easiest thing you can do right now is go to la4.org/policing, send an email. Let's bother them tonight and make sure that they know we're not going to leave them alone. After today's teach-in at 7 p.m., our social media person is literally going to put this on the internet as well. So you can put it on the internet and tell all your friends to send an email. And let's see how long it'll take for them to actually agendize it and get into conversation. Thank you so much, Jackie. But now let's go back to one. And I'm going to pass things to our friends Chauncey and Shelby to help us understand a little bit more about why reform is really relevant here as it relates to policing and the Charter Commission. Again, I just want to go back to this slide. If you've got questions during the presentation, go to tinyurl.com/police reform QA, or you can use this QR code. We'll take a look at that document at the very end of this at 6:45 to see what questions we can come back to. That way we keep it out of the chat box and don't have to scroll back and forth. Shansi, I'm gonna pass to you. Just tell me when to click.
Yeah, thank you, Godfrey. Appreciate that introduction and background context. This is an extremely important conversation, and I'm happy to be here with everyone this evening. I'm joined by Shelby Richardson, and she'll introduce herself in a moment. But yes, I'm Chauncey Smith. I'm an associate director at Catalyst California. Catalyst is an organization that works in partnership with community-based organizations to advance racial and economic equity. We build political power. We conduct innovative research and rigorous data analysis, and we run campaigns to change public systems. So I spearhead our work at Catalyst that is focused on criminal legal system reform and community safety issues. I'm an appointee to the State Racial Identity Profiling Act Advisory Board by Attorney General Bonta. I'm a former president of the LA City Task Force on Non-Law Enforcement Alternatives to Traffic Safety and a former member of the LA Metro Public Safety Advisory Board. Shelby, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Chauncey. I hope everybody can hear me well. But howdy, folks. My name is Shelby Richardson. I'm an organizer and youth program lead at the Social Justice Learning Institute based in Inglewood. We work in education advocacy with youth and with older community members. I lead an internal youth leadership program called the Urban Advocates Program, where we develop youth organizers and activists building their capacity and agency to pursue social justice and equity for marginalized and vulnerable community members or communities in general, communities that many, if not all of us, are a part of course. And I also lead coalition work and collaborations on behalf of SJLI. And I'm super, super excited to be here with you all. I'll pass it back to you, Chauncey.
Thanks, Shelby. Appreciate it. So, folks, Shelby and I have been working together over the past few years on some local police reform issues in the city of Los Angeles. So that's the context in which we are speaking with you today. And we want to have a conversation with you about why policing should be included in the charter reform process, which to date, as Godfrey shared, it hasn't happened. And it's a grave injustice. So the Charter Commission, next slide, please. So the Charter Commission is supposed to address the issues that are most important to our city, right? And the city budget is a clear measure of importance. It shows where taxpayer dollars are going, and it's a strong indicator of what the commission should direct its attention toward. So here you can see this is a donut chart. and it shows how our dollars are being spent on an annual basis. It shows specifically the rate of unrestricted revenue received by each department in fiscal year 26. And unrestricted revenue, as opposed to restricted revenue, are discretionary dollars, and the city can use them for a wide variety of purposes. It's essentially the portion of city funds that's not already tied up to pre-existing purposes. So here in this donut chart, you can see that out of a total of 6.6 billion in discretionary dollars, almost half, 46%, is spent on LAPD. And in terms of actual dollars, this is over $3 billion annually that goes towards LAPD out of the unrestricted resources and taxpayer dollars. Other investments that make LA safe and also a thriving city, such as fire department. We recently had the fires that were devastating for our city. Public works, which works on fixing streets and libraries and sidewalks, as well as libraries. They receive far less, right? And this is at a time when our city is struggling financially and needs more resources for wildfire recovery and to address important issues like homelessness. Next slide, please. So some key takeaways from the city budget. As mentioned, almost half of unrestricted city dollars continue to flow to LAPD, and it shapes the way the city can and cannot invest. More than all the other major service departments combined is how much LAPD is getting. And this level of allocation limits the city's flexibility to invest in housing, youth programs, behavioral health, and other things that people need in order to have healthy lives and be a thriving city, and things that make our community safer. And core community service are competing for a much smaller slice, as evidenced by the pie chart on the prior slide. And the distribution of unrestricted dollars shows that there's a significant misalignment between what everyday people need in order to be safe and be well, and what the actual budget practices are. Next slide. So we've established that in terms of importance, if our budget is any measure, it shows that addressing LAPD issues through the charter reform process is something that needs to occur. And this slide, it kind of unpacks things in a little bit better frame of reference. So some may say, hey, LA is a large city, right? So it makes sense that we would spend $3 billion annually on the police department. Well, this data visual accounts for that. And it shows how much spending Los Angeles does on police on a per person basis. So it takes population into account and it compares that to the statewide average. And you can see here in this bar chart, the red line going horizontally is how much the statewide average spending on local police department is over the course of time, right? You can see it's horizontal with a gradual trend going up. And it's from 2003 to 2022. The bars to compare are how much the city of LA spends on LAPD on a per capita basis over the same period of time. And you can see, taking population into account, the amount that we spend in the city of Los Angeles on local policing far outpaces the statewide average when you take population into account. So for example, if you look at the red line, it covers from around $500 per capita up to about $600 per capita on the far right. And to compare, for the city of Los Angeles, it stays generally above $700 on a per capita basis, and at some years it exceeds $800 per capita. So just taking dollars into account and population, it shows that in the city of Los Angeles, again, policing is one of the most important public policy issues that we have, and the Charter Commission should be addressing it. Next slide, please. Another thing that we should account for when we're thinking about why the Charter Commission needs to address LAPD in its deliberative process is some of the impacts and the harms that are caused by our broken policing system in the city of Los Angeles. And one measure of that is the amount of resources that are wasted on a daily basis to cover the costs of liability payments as a result of misconduct or harms to community members by police officers. So here in this chart, you can see multi-year liability payments for each department over 5 fiscal years, right? So on the horizontal axis at the bottom, it separates each department out based on what it is. So police, street services, transportation, so on and so forth, right? Vertically, it has amount of payouts. And then the different color bars represent different fiscal years, with the orange bars on the far right for each group being fiscal year 20, and then the most recent fiscal year available, fiscal year 25 is the one in purple on the left side for each different department. And you can see on the far left, if you look at the bars, for each fiscal year, the amount of liability payouts for LAPD far exceeds those for any other departments, and it acts as a tremendous use of public taxpayer dollars. So, for example, in fiscal year 25, the bar on the far left of this slide, you can see that nearly $160 million were paid out for settlements and judgments as a result of LAPD issues. And on top of that, if you add up all 5 fiscal years together, it shows that the total amount that was paid for LAPD issues over those 5 years was over $380 million. So it's not just the department's budget itself, but there's a ripple effect by having an institution that is fueled with problematic practices, because it has ripple effects on other aspects of our city budget and in turn taxpayer dollars. Again, at a time when our city is struggling financially and we have other issues that need to be addressed that help improve community safety, this further shows the need for the Charter Commission to address issues of LAPD as soon as possible. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about the harms or the ripple effects of our current system in place of over-reliance on LAPD. So another thing that we should be thinking about when it comes to why the Charter Commission needs to look into what's going on with LAPD is, in addition to so much dollars being spent, there's also questions of efficacy, right? So what's the return on investment when it comes to $3 billion annually plus liability payouts for LAPD? One would think that if we're investing billions of dollars into an institution annually, it would have strong outcomes and live into everyday people's expectations. So what's the return on investment for LAPD? Well, the data show that spending more on policing doesn't mean it will make communities safer, right? And clearance rates are a measure of efficacy for law enforcement entities. It shows the rate at which crimes are solved, right? So the purported purpose of law enforcement is to fight crime and protect everyday people, right? So with that purpose in mind, if making arrests and solving crimes are what LAPD is supposed to do, the clearance rates are one of our best indicators for that. So a crime is cleared if it's after it's reported, if there's an arrest made. It's not cleared if no arrest is made, right? So an ideal scenario, something is reported, an arrest is made, that's a 100% clearance rate, right? So this data visual compares the clearance rate for LAPD over a course of time, so 2003 to 2022, against the statewide average, right? The black line, kind of zigzagging up and down, but generally trending downward toward the right, is a line that reflects the clearance rate for LAPD, and the red line is the California average clearance rate for all law enforcement agencies across the state. Okay, so if you look at the far left, the top of the black line, in 2023, the clearance rate for LAPD was somewhere above 23%. And now, more recently, as we go to the far right, it's all the way down to about 13% or so, right? And that's extremely low, right? So to compare, a 13% clearance rate means that out of 100 crimes, only 13 are solved, right? That means on the other end of the spectrum, 87% of the time, right? 13 minus 100, 87% of the time, LAPD doesn't make an arrest. A crime is not cleared once it's reported, right? That's the failure rate, 87% failure rate, right? So to compare that contextually, could you imagine if our high schools failed 87% of students when it comes to graduation, right? Would we still invest billions of dollars in those schools, or would we think about looking into what the schools are doing and transforming the ways in which we go about our education, right? Imagine hospitals failing to properly treat 87% of patients, right? Would we pump billions of dollars into that institution, or would we transform it when an opportunity arises, like charter reform, right? But when it comes to policing, on an annual basis, no one questions this, right? So just putting the pieces together, this is another strong indicator of why the Charter Reform Commission needs to urgently bring this up for discussion so that we can think about the different policies and practices in place when it comes to LAPD and how to improve them so that we help improve not only safety in the city of Los Angeles, but also help preserve resources for better uses. All right. So with that being said, I will pass the floor to Shelby, who will walk us through a bit more.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chauncey, on covering how much of LA City's budget is allocated basically towards militarizing the police, obviously to no avail when it comes to increasing or ensuring community safety, as Chauncey just described for us. But yeah, they invest so much into LAPD instead of substantial investment in community-based safety and safe and productive infrastructure. You know, other departments are left with having to fight over city dollars to resource their efforts and services and programs and their overall impact. And these are the same departments that could actually contribute or, in fact, better serve some of the duties that are surprisingly assigned to police. And so actually, let's talk about it. We can go to the next slide. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, the police have a huge impact on our lives. Aside from violence that they either inflict or violence that they are supposed to stop or come in between or curtail. Believe it or not, police officers are responsible for mitigating nonviolent threats to safety, which are things that could be handled by folks who aren't armed, right? So somebody other than a cop, and quite frankly, cops are not trained, nor are they well suited to handle these issues that are listed on the slide anyway. But for instance, right, if we look at the first bullet point, cops are responsible for homelessness crises, right? But instead of calling an armed police officer to handle someone who was unhoused, we can call on an organization that's centered around unhoused or homelessness advocacy and awareness and outreach, things of that nature. Second bullet point, right? Instead of an armed cop responding to a mental health crisis, we can have trained mediators and therapists and professional mental health counselors pull up to the scene. Going to the third bullet point, another example, right? Instead of calling armed cops on kids who don't go to school, we can rely on a licensed social worker to handle the job, right? And so alternatives like these are what we are calling for. And so, you know, our efforts are going to push Los Angeles to invest in establishing response teams that can answer the call when these types of issues are present. And we are right, because even the police department's union, the Police Protective League, is advocating that these responsibilities be relieved, right, of police duty, and placed on someone or something else that's more appropriate, because the range of responsibilities on police is far too much. And we can see that document to the right of the bulleted list. And these things can be addressed in the charter reform. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at highlighted important issues that can be addressed through the charter reform, right? We've got ending racial profiling. So through a charter reform, we can address lessening the harm caused through targeting and criminalizing specific demographics. Apologize for the noise in the background, folks, if you guys hear anything. The second bullet point, we have preventing police violence and improving oversight and accountability. So the second and the third bullet point. So if police officers commit offenses or there's misconduct, right, that's reported, there will be a process to hold police officers accountable. And a part of preventing police violence, if the city invests in alternative response teams to issues that do not require armed cops, then that'll lessen the likelihood of unnecessary escalation and injury. We've got improving transparency, so we can influence the increase of access to data and reports, so that we can monitor police activity and outcomes and be able to respond to any injustices that are documented. We've got enhancing protections for First Amendment rights. This folds in with holding police accountable for their offenses and violations and misconduct. We saw firsthand, right? Some of us were literally out in the field. We saw firsthand police respond to folks practicing their First Amendment rights in response to these ICE raids, protesting on behalf of like vulnerable community members. Civilians were met with tear gas, batons, and rubber bullets, right? And then lastly, justice reinvestment. So taking public dollars and placing them in budgets that cater to the actual well-being and sustainability and empowerment of our communities. So for instance, those would be the libraries and the parks and the green spaces and organizations dedicated to community-based safety. And if you go to the next slide, we'll see that other jurisdictions have made certain reforms to their police departments to better serve the needs of their communities. So if we look closely, we'll see that in 2017, Seattle formed a commission separate from the police department that would provide oversight to the department, right? San Francisco did the same, but also with a separate budget for the oversight department. In Baltimore, liability costs became a part of the police department's budget. While here in LA, as Chauncey shared with us, it is a separate an additional $160 million that is covered by the city's budget. We'll see in Minneapolis, folks tried to replace the police department with a new and reimagined Department of Public Safety that wouldn't necessarily use police officers for issues that don't require armed force, right? It wasn't successful, but it was definitely a trailblazing event. And lastly, in Oakland, they were successful at redirecting or like shifting certain calls from armed cops to unarmed responders. So we definitely see that jurisdictions in other states have addressed the concern of armed police officer enforcement. And so it's not a foreign thing to successfully reform and reimagine the role of armed police officers, and increase or expand the role of alternative departments, groups, organizations that can better serve and protect us, you know, and our neighbors and our kids. And now I'll pass it back to Godfrey. Thanks for tuning in, folks.
Thanks, y'all. Folks can give Chauncey and Shelby a hand. Thank you so much for taking the time to put together these slides and really help us make the case for ensuring police reform as part of the Charter Commission's work and study comprehensively of all of the city governance laws and policies that are in the Charter. A couple of things I just want to make sure people heard in the conversation. And again, while I go over some of these like big headlines that I heard, you can go to the question document and just make sure if you've got questions that you go there and document them. I saw at least one question in there already the last time I looked. But right now, like even though Shelby and Chauncey in those last two slides walk through a possible set of reforms, including some inspired by work happening in other cities, right now, our coalition of groups who have become really interested in this haven't even gotten behind any of these recommendations yet. Like we're literally just trying to say, hey, reforms are possible. And they have an impact on this large investment that we make as a city. Almost half of our monies go to policing. What happens with policing impacts our city. This should be talked about at the commission, and we should be learning from academics, not just community members as well, but like people who have made their entire livelihoods creating policy and law and seeing what different outcomes look like from across the city. So we're really, or from across the nation. So we're really interested in ensuring that folks at the commission know this is stuff to actually study. And you all need to study this so that you can make strong decisions around whether or not to even touch specific parts of the charter. So we're really excited that we've got folks like Chauncey and Shelby in our Mitson community that are beginning to be able to elevate what knowledge they have. And we're hoping that when this does get agendized at commission, that folks like them will be folks who can support the commission to wrap their heads around all these possible reforms. Again, if you missed sort of the beginning of our call, right now there is not yet an announced time or date for the Charter Commission to take a look at all the possible reasons why we are spending time on this call today, all the possible reforms they could be evaluating. So we are now asking you all as the public to take a moment to go to la4.org/policing and send a quick email. This email will go to not just the chair of the commission, but also the folks on the committee that can actually talk about this and the staff members who can move the agendizing process forward. If they are able to hear from enough folks and they know that we're not going to stop until this is agendized, we are hopeful that they will pick this up as soon as December. You can see on the screen that there's even a number of times where you can give public comment. There's a town hall even, but those highlighted dates are the ones we are trying to influence as possible dates that they can use those agendas as ways to ensure that they're fitting in police reform as a subject of study and action at the Charter Commission. This has to happen soon. Basically, they're going to pass the baton in the spring to City Council with all the recommendations. If they don't take up this topic now, the baton will not include anything about police reform. They have to start opening up this issue now for it to have meaningful impact on their recommendations to City Council. Again, la4.org/policing. Thank you to those of you who've already sent your emails. You can also go online at Instagram. I saw Tathir just a moment ago. Put in the Instagram link as well. You can share it on your feeds, your stories, and all of that. Now I want to go to questions. And I'm opening up the document of questions, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'd love to actually, oh, there was a question on it and disappeared. Did someone take down the question that was on there? It was a question. I remember
Maybe
the
we
question,
covered
so
it.
I'm happy to,
Maybe we covered
yeah. I'm happy to ask the premise of the question in case there are folks here, but if you haven't gotten your questions in the document, feel free to put it back in there. The premise of the question was in LA, the LAPPL, the LA Police Protective League, the quote unquote union of the police officers have a lot of power. And again, like it's hard to imagine a world in which we can take meaningful reform while that particular group, the LAPPL, continues to exert its power, not just over the police who are members of the league, but also they could exert power over, our elected officials as well, who could potentially push change forward. Is there any, I don't know, like, are there any thoughts about that from our speakers? I don't know that that's within the topic of study that you all just presented, but I do remember that was the tenor of the question.
Yeah, I mean, they have significant political power as that person mentioned, and with that political power, they have the ability to influence decision makers and outcomes. I wouldn't be surprised if part of the reason why police reform hasn't been in the discussion within the Charter Commission is because of that considerable influence behind the scenes. So I think this really speaks to the importance of today's conversation and why members of LA Forward, Ground Game LA, the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles should, if they're interested, get actively involved because we, as a collective, have significant political power too. And if we raise our voices, if we exercise our rights to free speech, we can help offset that opposition and successfully persuade the Charter Commission to do what it was empowered to do when it was created. Thank you for bringing up that question. It's a very helpful point, but it really speaks to the reason why we're here today, and it also provides us with a guide on what we need to do in order to get a win here.
Yeah, remember that there are many ways to actually get something on the ballot. Today, we're talking about one way, which is persuading the commission to take this up, create a public conversation around possible reforms, or at least challenges that could deserve reform, and have that conversation happen in public, be documented, etc. Even in a world in which they didn't pass this on to city council, we're elevating some things that possibly need to be worked on. And we as folks in Los Angeles who are residents here, if we really, really wanted to, and we were really, really motivated to, and we could find the money and people power to, we could collect signatures to put some things on the ballots ourselves, right? Like not all doors are closed. We know that Measure ULA, which is a big funding measure for affordable housing and homelessness prevention, was put on there not by public officials because of the threat of apartment associations and other moneyed interests in housing. It was put on there by people and collecting signatures. So we can and will do that again if we need to. But for now, I think we are trying the route of this charter commission because we have identified that there are commissioners and even council members who are empathetic to at least some of these reforms. What's stalling right now is they're not even putting out on an agenda to talk about. And so we want to create that public conversation. I saw a second question here. If you could push for one reform that would have the most significant impact, which one would it be? Is there or is there one that feels more likely to get on the ballot? All of these are kind of, subjective questions, and Chauncey and Shelby are very smart, but I don't you don't need to,
Yeah, it depends on it
yeah,
depends
Chauncey,
on
go ahead.
yeah, it depends on who you ask. I think um there's numerous things on the on the plate that are all extremely valuable. And if we're able to get even one of them to move forward, it would be a significant win, whether that's racial profiling, trying to protect people of color from being harmed, whether it's um, enhancing the weak accountability systems by transforming how the Board of Rights operates, whether it's improving transparency and public access to records of law enforcement misconduct and data, you name it. There's numerous very valuable options available to us. And it's a huge disservice to the people of Los Angeles for there not to at least be a conversation and within the commission process. So once again, this just speaks to the need for why we should lift our voices and get the Charter Commission to do what it's supposed to do.
And as far as like the viability question of is there one that feels more likely to get on the ballot? Council members have tried already, right? Like I think actually Councilmember McCosker was able to pass a possible reform to appear on last November's ballot, and it was taken down sort of at the last minute. I think the mayor didn't want it on or something like that. And it would have helped to reform some police discipline measures. So there is some political will to reform aspects of policing, and so there are things that could get to the ballot. I think what we're really interested in, and the mayor's feedback apparently to Councilmember McCosker at the time is that like there is a need for comprehensive police reform. Comprehensive meaning we need to look at all angles of how we think about policing, how it operates in our city, the impact it has, the funding structures around it, the authority over it. These are all different questions. Police discipline by itself does not cover it. Police oversight by itself does not cover it. And so I think we need to try to throw all of these different balls in the mix of the commission and see which ones they're willing to fly, and then we'll work on council next. There's a question here about y'all mentioned that the charter could prevent racial profiling. Can you say something more about that? What does that look like, Chauncey?
Yeah. So the charter lays out the responsibilities for different governmental entities. It says what the powers of the city council are, the powers of the mayor are, the powers of various departments and agencies, right? So in theory, the charter could be amended to put restrictions on the role of LAPD. So when it comes to racial profiling, one of the key issues is officers engaging in what's known as pretextual traffic stops. So a pretextual traffic stop occurs when an officer has a hunch that someone may be up to criminal activity or involved in some criminal activity, and they don't have a legitimate basis to stop the person based on their hunch. So they find some low-level minor issue, such as a broken taillight, some other equipment issue, or maybe there's administrative issues like outstanding paperwork when they run their tags. they identify something relatively low level like that as a basis to justify stopping the person so that they can then go on a fishing expedition to search for evidence of more serious criminal activity. But research shows that pretextual stops are not only extremely ineffective as a way to uh, make communities safer, make roads safer, prevent harms, they're also extremely devastating for people of color who are all too often the subject of that hunch because they're black or brown or because they're undocumented and what have you, right? So if the Charter Commission were even to give us a conversation about issues of LAPD, this is something that we could bring up to them and make recommendations on, and it definitely needs to happen. And the same is the case for other issues that Shelby walked us through earlier, whether it's accountability systems, adopting amendments to the charter to make sure that people's constitutional rights are protected, especially when it comes to the freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, so we can prevent harms like we saw occurring this summer during the ICE raids and then during other protests like back in 2020.
Thanks so much, Chauncey. I don't see any other questions in the document. So what I'll do right now is actually remind folks where you can take action, and you see it on the screen, the QR code. I'll put in the chat box again. I want to walk people through what the website looks like in case you're running into an issue. So if you go to laforward.org/policing, you'll get this red box here that says email the commission. Sometimes when you click on it, like when I click on it, I don't really get something. I get like select an app to open this link. That means my browser isn't like the right browser for me to use it. However, it does work when I go to this website on my phone. So if you're like, oh my God, it doesn't work, let me tell Godfrey or LA Forward doesn't work, try your phone. Try a different browser, try it another way. It works on my phone and you're able to send an email that way. And I know that some of you have been able to send emails as well as of this call. The other thing you can do when you're on this webpage is to download this particular graphic and post this yourself on your social media or share it out with your friends by email, your organizations, your neighborhood councils, whoever. But you can save the image, go to right click on it, click save image as, and then send it off and post it. This is a second part of that image as well that you can right click and post as well, because it kind of summarizes the point of our call today. So head to la4.org/policing. Can I get like some sort of emojis or something from folks who are able to send an email or take action? I just want to get a sense of who was able to take action today. I'm seeing someone party, some thumbs ups, etc. Again, spread the word about this. Thank you all for taking action. And again, if we're going to keep everybody on this call and folks in our particular networks updated on when this is agendized. But until it is agendized, or even when it is agendized and we're ready to actually start pushing for actual recommendations and reforms, these are some key dates to consider. Again, Wednesday the 3rd, Thursday the 11th, Tuesday the 16th are the next days that this particular committee is meeting. There's also a general town hall that the entire commission is holding in Council District 13, location TBD for now. So if you can make some of these dates, save them on your calendar, and we'll be back to you with possible talking points or things you can do to support this work. Otherwise, I really do want to thank League of Women Voters, Ground Game LA. I want to thank our friends at Catalyst, California, and Social Justice Learning Institute for presenting as well, and everybody here for taking the time on this rainy day. And of course, most importantly, anybody who is sending an email or getting the word out about this. There's many issues at the Charter Commission. And it is wild that one of the predominant issues that is affecting our city and our communities is not getting any time in front of commissioners. So thank you all so much for your help, and look forward to seeing you at the commission, hopefully on a day where we get to talk about this. Thanks so much. Bye, y'all.